Welcome to the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
Here we aim to provide you with the experience, strength, and hope of professionals actively working on the front lines in the field of food addiction.
The purpose of this summit is to educate you and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a disease with abstinence as the solution.
Every day for the month of October, we are sharing one inspiring speaker or highlighted food preparation video from the incredible Tony Vassallo of Moda Nutrition Inc. and the Real Food Revival Movement.
We have 4 weeks of interviews with the leaders in the field of food addiction, clinicians who are working on the front lines, registered dietitians and nutritionists that are working toward bridging the eating disorder and food addiction camps, and people just like you and me.
Here we talk about all things food addiction recovery. Most importantly, how to thrive rather than just survive.
So stay positive, make a change for yourself, tell others about your change, and hopefully the message will spread.
And as Vera always says,
the power is ours.
Welcome, you guys. Thank you for joining us again at the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit. Today we have Nikki Glantz from Milestones. So I'm going to have her introduce herself and we'll get started. So Nikki, can you tell us about yourself professionally? Who are you?
Certainly. Well, like you said, Molly, I am Nikki Glantz. I work here at Milestones, a treatment center here in Cooper City, Florida. I've actually been working here 22 years, which is crazy awesome. And I've been the nutritionist here the whole time, and actually recently became the chief operating officer as well. So I actually have 2 roles here, and kind of basically established this is home. You know, this is where I want to be. So yeah, so I've been here for 22 years. Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about working with eating disorder and food addiction as a registered dietitian? Like, how did you get into this area of nutrition?
Okay, so sure. Well, certainly working at Milestones, we see our fair share of people struggling with both eating disorders, food addiction, and often there's that, what's the difference? What's the similarities? What I have found is there's not this down the line cut exactly. I would say both struggle. I mean, the similarities are both are struggling, both are looking for answers, both are, often tried so many different programs, different diets, different. And the truth is, I find if I had to make a distinction, I would say food addiction struggles more with those who have food addiction struggle more with the substance itself, kind of like an alcoholic, like so we consider sugar and flour the substance, the allergy in the body, where someone who's more with an eating disorder, literally that fine line of that, and more compulsive eater, maybe more sensitivity to, or I would say more emotional eating. So sensitivity to like the trigger situations, not necessarily the food, but I have to say, sometimes they interweave. I wouldn't say, oh, you have a food addiction and you have an eating disorder. No, I would say there's a big cross between the two. And quite honestly, I think a plan, in my opinion, of no sugar, no flour tends to work for both, but certainly those who identify that there's an addiction there.
So you say sugar and flour. I know we've interviewed some individuals who feel like grains are a problem for those with food addiction. What are your thoughts on that? And yeah, like, is it better to be more inclusive or more like on the safer side?
It's a good question. And there was some other word like safer side, and inclusive, and all those good things. So I would say this. I like I said before, I've worked here now 22 years, so I'm definitely more treatment center based, but I have my own private practice. And I would say, it also starts with, I need to know the story. Like how did you get to my office? Like what brought you here? What was your struggle? And then I get to hear a little bit about what, is it more food related? Is it more family based, emotional, that stuff, and how they deal with things that go haywire? Like what brought them to the office? And then I would say in reference to food plans, again, okay, so speaking private practice, I would say maybe I don't go straight, no sugar, no flour. At first, I would say no sugar, and maybe they can have flour, maybe take out white flour and see how they do with grains and different whole grains. I have to say though, even at Milestones, we don't take grains out. So we are no sugar, no flour, but we keep potatoes and sweet potatoes and all sorts of, so we don't do flours, but we keep whole grains in there. They can have oatmeal and things like that. So I don't know if what's safer, but to me, it's the story. Like, where were you? And then what works? So across the line, I'm also checking in. How's this working for you? I've had people that struggle with certain fruits, and so that's like interesting because that's not something you would say right off the bat, like, oh, don't have fruits, but certain people even struggle with watermelon. And so then I have to work with them on that. So, and I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it does, because that's certainly something that we've found working with our own clients. And we're obviously, Clarissa and I are not registered dietitians, but when we work with people with food addiction and we talk about the food, it's more like food as the substance and then like
Correct.
the behavioral piece of it. And
Yes.
so we just always kind of revert back to that question of, okay, what's acting like a drug in your brain, like that
Right.
alcohol or the whatever.
Correct. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with. Like, because truly, no, if it was that easy, then I would just hand a piece of paper to each person, be like, here's your plan, and just be on with your way. And it's not like that. It's, even I speak to people every day. And so sometimes it's just their nighttime activity, like their nighttime routine, their hygiene at night. Like, are they staying up late? And then that causes the morning to be late and they're rushing. Maybe they're rushers and then they don't have breakfast and they restrict in the day. So really you have to kind of pedal back. We call chaining back to say, what's the base of the situation here? And let's build from there. So it may be a food and a substance, it may be trigger situations. So all of that we have to be looking out for.
Yeah. And that brings me to another question about the whole grains, like you said, like the potatoes, the sweet potatoes, that kind of thing. Do you find that those act like drugs in people's brains in your experience in private practice and in treatment? Or is it more likely that there's some kind of story behind it? Like you were saying, there's like a story there to that food.
Well, that almost then answers the first question, is what's the distinction between someone struggling with food addiction and one with an eating disorder? So if I hear from them that they can incorporate a sweet potato, a baked potato, a brown rice, or a quinoa, and they're okay, maybe it's more the emotional eater, maybe more the eating disorder than the food addict who struggles more on the, the idea of this particular substance. So I will say in treatment, I have to say in private practice, most of my peeps will do well with grains introduced. For sure, there's a handful. Let me be clear. There's for sure people that are like, but I have to say it's a smaller handful, but that will say like, I can't even handle that. Like the thought of knowing there's a sweet potato on my lunch, it excites me so much. I want to eat my lunch on my way to work in my lunchbox in my car. So I've had those, but I will say those are far and few between, because once I get someone off the sugar and flour, they get themselves off with my guidance. They really are free. I mean, that's what's so amazing about this is really when you're, to know even my story is when I started, I was in a private practice straight out of college, knew nothing of this land, of this food addiction or eating disorder land very specifically. And I was working with a bunch of private practice nutritionists, enjoyed my job. Everything was good. Milestones, the treatment center was just starting up. And they contracted a nutritionist to come over there and work once or twice a week. I was assigned to Milestones. I came on over and I literally within 2 weeks was like, okay, I like this. What's going on here? There was excitement and I loved the situational. I just loved, I was drawn towards it. And 22 years later, I'm here and doing very well with it and loving my peeps. So gosh, I don't know why I went on that tangent. Basically just wanted to tell you about myself mid-interview. So you're welcome for that answer to a question you didn't ask. You're welcome. I don't know where we were going. Please proceed with another question.
Oh, I am loving all of it.
I just don't know. I just wanted to incorporate my background. So keep going.
We did have a question of how did you find yourself at Milestones? So you just like went right there. Like you just did it.
I just jumped it. I just felt it. I felt it was coming as a question. So I threw it out. What else would you like to know?
I'm wondering, because this is something I've also personally run into is, those of us who come from, maybe eating disorder treatment background, and then to find out food addiction is also a piece of the puzzle, we are maybe stuck in that relentless pursuit of thinness. And maybe this is why we want to eliminate some of these grains. And maybe they aren't trigger foods, but our eating disorder brain wants us to be restrictive, but in order to treat the food addiction, we have to maybe add some more volume. So do you find it's challenging to like kind of find that sweet spot?
Yes. Now I will say, as I've learned about the eating disorder, I mean, it's been years now, but I would say I was a little more open to, okay, that sounds, I can hear that. Let's go with that. What I found is we get back to the basics, that if I let the person lead that way, so I'll try, I'm always open to trying, like, let's do that. Let's see how you do. Basically put it back in their hands and see how they do. If they do great, I can adjust with that. I can go with that. I don't want to write the script for them and say, I don't know how that's going to go, but I kind of do. But God bless, if someone does well with it, great. So yes, I will adjust with them. I will help them. But I also want to make sure not to co-sign the eating disorder where, like you're saying, like there's that, I want to take grains out. And then we find out later they really want to take grains out because they wanted to restrict. And it's not really because, people will come in with all sorts of fears like, or they'll say like, oh, butter's disgusting or this disgusts them. Like, so I hear that when you say it, I can feel the disgust with the butter and the word. Like we have to even first work on that. What I often say when they get here is like, listen, I know this is crazy and you don't know me from a hole in the wall. However, believe it or not, this is not about weight and food. I know that's crazy, but this is about learning how to eat again, learning how to be at a meal and be talking to someone and have a conversation instead of being obsessed about what's on my plate and their plate and what they didn't eat and what it's being eaten, who left this and being able to live again. So I really focus on that and kind of with that talk and that kind of, a person wants to be there and I want them to be there. I mean, we call it the freedom plan because I want them to feel free. Like I want that for them. And I feel like that's why I've been here for 22 years because I've seen it happen. So again, tangent on the answer to your question. Yes and no with that, but you got it. Okay, keep going. So, okay.
So when people do come, so again, it's going to be different and maybe you can describe how it's different between when you're at Milestones versus when you're in your private practice. But when people come and it is clearly food addiction, are there things that you are willing to leave off of the food plan for them? Like, or does everybody pretty much at Milestones have a similar food plan question. and then separate in the private practice?
So one of the things we like about Milestones, the way we do it. So so we have people that come in with anorexia, bulimia, which is a bulimorexia type of mix, diabulimia, compulsive overeating, binge eating, all, anywhere on the spectrum. One of the things about Milestones is that our food plan is similar in the way that the guidelines are the same, which means there's no real separation. Like you're anorexic and you're, we don't like that. We don't even like to do it's a person with eating disorder, a person with anorexia, but nonetheless, we don't separate that. So the food plan is very similar. Now with the food plan being specific that I write, then the numbers will be different. So the amounts that come in, maybe someone has snacks, maybe someone doesn't, maybe they have more of this. That being said, that's something we like. I would say it's almost like the charm about Milestones is that it's not like you go in the room with those people like, no. We're all inclusive. We're here because we're struggling with behaviors around food that are definitely debilitating. We're no longer living our best lives. Now, not on the opposite side, but on the side where it comes from private practice, that means the person is still living, functioning, of course, living, but, functioning, doing their best to come for a weekly appointment. So they're holding it together. With that person, I typically will not go straight to sugar, flour, no sugar, no flour. I will get them there if that's where we need to go. I will kind of go the least resistant route. And then if they need it, I will get them there. But I think it's a tough sell to someone that's coming to my office, for 1 hour and then they're leaving. I think that's really tough. So I will put other things in line, I won't go there initially, no.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you have, I imagine you do, experience with volume eaters because, we find we remove the sugar and the flour and then volume kind of pops up. And what has been your experience with that and how do you work with that?
So very much. So we treat, or, the way my take is, so you can, all these behaviors around eating disorder. So it can be that you restrict, you could, vomit, you could over-exercise, you could volume eat, you could have a struggle with sugar and flour, just sugar, just flour, and then I see salt and fat as another one. So I put a few categories. So usually my volume, salt and fat, sugar and flour are the 4 that pop up like that. So I definitely see volume eating. And I've even had people say to me, well, I'm still eating no sugar, no flour. I'm just volume eating. They won't say it like that, but they're, I didn't let in sugar and flour, but I, ate a 5-pound bag of, it could be vegetables. Like I have someone tell me they ate radishes or mushroom, And that doesn't go well for the stomach, unfortunately. It's a real struggle. So yes, the volume eating is a big deal. So I will say most of my food plans that I write have numbers around them. Now I will make ranges, and I will allow the vegetables to be a little stronger. I don't mind cooked or raw. I'm real open with that. But I think volume eating is a very big deal, because I think Marty, Dr. Lerner, my partner and coworker here, one of his things is trading out chairs on the Titanic. So, you let down one, so maybe you let go of, compulsive overeating in this way, but you've picked up this other one over here, this symptom of. So volume eating, unfortunately, people will say, oh, but it's not sugar and flour. Like, no, that's one of the volume eating, so absolutely. So we work on that with numbers, ranges. I encourage weighing the food, or having some sort of like, okay, how much would you have of that? Like, what is a serving of that? So I do work on that right from the start, because that is a big one.
Yeah, we find that to be true for us too.
Absolutely.
Not for everybody, but a vast
there's
majority. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So thinking back, okay, having been at Milestones for 22 years, having it been like you were working in this practice and then having this experience and then you stayed, have you found that there was something that you learned when you were in school, or even that early time working in that other practice before you came to Milestones, that just is so different? Like, you learned something and the way you actually practice now is just totally different. And if so, can you speak about that?
Yes. Everything I learned is completely different than what I do now. I did not learn about any of this. I didn't even know this was out there. When I first came to Milestones, what we were doing, which we weren't doing anything wrong. We were following like the ADA, American Dietetic Association food plan. That's our, and food groups and, calories and low fat and, which is lovely. It's all information you need to know, because you need to know what that base is. And then when I came here, I was like, oh, that's not anything I learned. I've never even heard of this, because we learned about eating disorders and people that struggle and trying to help them. But it was just a food plan that was calorie numbered. It was just a block of that. Never the sugar, flour, never the addiction piece ever. So I absolutely learned. I don't want to say I learned nothing, because I do feel like I learned. I pride myself in that I went to school and have my degree. However, yes, it's nothing of what I do today. And every year I've learned. I mean, now I'm pretty much in my groove at 22 years. But I will say in the first few years, I was like, I remember we had someone with anorexia, and she was like, I'll run that down for you to get it copied. I'm like, well, that's so nice of you to run that down and run it back. You're sweet. Like, not realizing like, oh, I'm engaging them in their eating disorder and their fun directional running that they want to do and move. Why don't we move the furniture, redo that? I'm like, well, that sounds like fun. Not realizing that everyone's trying to move. So once I got, clued in, then it's, but I will say, once I learned the food plan and how we roll, it took me, I always say it took me about 2 years to understand it to the level that anyone could ask me a question and I could answer it with confidence, that I understood why, because I'm such a why person. Like, well, why would we do that? Why? So it took me 2 years to be able to teach it like that and be able to be like, okay, this is why we do this. Let me give you another analogy for this. So hopefully that answered your question. Once again, a little tangent-y. That's who I am.
So do you have colleagues that either embrace your work or think like, she has no idea what she's talking about?
Yes. So I do feel fortunate enough that I've definitely encountered more colleagues that get it. Now, that being said, we are usually, like, if I'm referring someone out, like if they're crossing state lines and need to go with a nutritionist there, we've usually found a place that kind of already accepts this kind of thinking of no sugar, no flour, or addiction model or anything of that nature. I will say at the conferences I've gone to over the years, and I've had a few nutritionists on the phone where they just come from that intuitive model. And so it's not right from wrong. It's just how they believe it to be true. I can say my goal would be for anyone to be able to intuitively eat and listen to their body and be attuned to that. That to me would be the ultimate goal. I just, not to keep throwing out the 22 years, but when you have an eating disorder, you kind of hurt that part that goes, I feel like a bowl of strawberries would be nice. I'd also like to top that bowl of strawberries with everything I have in the freezer that's chocolatey and delicious. I'd also like to make the bowl this big. I'd also like to use a chisel, spoon, shovel, like something, so I don't feel like it's fair to ask someone with an eating disorder to then go intuitive eating and follow that. Because on a good day, of course, it's a lovely salad or whatever, or hamburger, whatever it is. On a bad moment, a bad day, OMG. So to answer that question, I have found colleagues on both sides of it. And those I will say that don't, it's kind of fun. Fun's probably a strong word, but when I'm up against that, I'm like, so tell me what the fight is. Like, tell me, like, well, that's restrictive. That's ridiculous. They can never eat. I'm like, well, are you worried about something? Do you think they can't have carbs? And we'll go into like, they can have potatoes, sweet potatoes, spaghetti squash. They can have certain crackers, rice cakes, what. So, but I do know sometimes I'll get up with someone where, it's not the fight to have. I'm like, yeah, intuitive is the only way to go. You're so right. So thank you. Thanks. I feel better that I've spoken to you about that. So, I just meet them there and just enjoy the ride. So yeah.
Oh goodness. I feel like you're speaking our language. And again, we were just talking to Marty yesterday and we're all on the FAI board together and stuff too. So we have interactions with him from time to time, but he was, talking about being zebras and being with your herd. And I feel like you would probably be one of those zebras that I would gravitate toward. Oh, just, like, I feel like we're the same. Yeah, we're in the same herd. So, in the same vein of like having these, like certainly colleagues that don't get it, colleagues that do, how do we, in your opinion, how can we bridge that gap it's just it can be so dogmatic on either side. Yes. How can we bridge it in your experience and in your opinion?
So if we, I don't know the, oh my gosh answer, but what I have found is if, just like I do with clients, if I can leave room, which I'm a talker, so sometimes it's hard to do that. But if I can leave room for them to vent out why they hold their opinion so tight, so strong, so vehemently, that's the way it needs to be. And kind of just find the space to be like, all right, so what if we did this? What if we allow them to pick what they wanted for breakfast from these choices, like kind of meet them in the middle with like, we establish a little more of maybe what the food groups are or the foods on the list, but let them intuitively pick from that. That would, to me, finding the halfway meeting, we'd have to give up some of that, like no sugar, no flour would still be our thing, but we'd have to say, okay, what if they want a little more, which I'm also a believer in harm reduction and helping someone get through a moment versus a binge. I'd rather like, what else can you have to kind of walk through that situation? So if I applied that same thing I would do with clients, I feel like I would do that with them and I'd be open to it. Listen, again, freedom's the goal. Like we're trying to get everyone to just feel good about this and feel connected and be able to move on with their lives and not make food their focus. So I'm open to bring that to the table. I can just get a little feisty sometimes, but I truly am someone that will like meet you there and be like, all right, let's try that. Let's maybe an intuitive program. I don't know. I would have to come up with some name that we did, but yeah, I'd be open to that. That's what I feel like we would need.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of how you probably work with clients anyways. So figuring out that sweet spot. So what would you say is one of the challenges or one of the main challenges you find when working with clients and working with the food plan?
I would say, two things come to mind right away, which I often say in my group. So timing and intention. So with times, I would say that's the biggest thing I see for people, not so much in treatment because we're a little structured here. So, we're group breaks, it's snack, group breaks, it's, and there's time for all of that. But I would say the transition home, which we've been blessed to even have telehealth, where we're able to send a person home, still work with them and see them in their environment, which has been an amazing addition to our treatment center. We're very happy about that. But I would say time and intention. So timing, which is, are they putting the time into whether it's grocery shopping, getting their food delivered, making food, like what's their food prep situation, the timing they put into it, and then intention. So I will ask that all the time, like, what's your intention? Because let's say they were making something and they realized they doubled the carb or doubled the thing or left something out. If their intention was to do it right, then then you did it right. If your intention was, that's what I was trying to do, then you did it right. And then we just learn from this point forward. Okay, now it's done a little differently. But I would say those are the two things, because if you check your intentions, you'll know were you know, I always joke around, like if someone walks in and you're like, oh, well, hello, I didn't notice you were coming in. Well, so you're doing something mischievous. Your intentions aren't great. But if someone walks in and you're like prepping your food and doing your thing, you know, you're in that right space. If you're hiding something, you know, so that's, I always think intention's great to just check in. And then I think it's a self-check, and then timing. How much time are you putting towards it? And what are your times in the day? Because there's a lot of, for at least me, I see a lot of, they push off a meal or try to scrunch it together. And then that becomes the rest of the day, the calculations. I call it mental gymnastics. Like you're flipping over this, you're shoving this meal over here. Like, I want this meal here. And tell me what's going on that this isn't happening. Like, are there meetings popping up at work? Are you at home all day? I'm a pack your food in your lunchbox, even if you work from home person, so that we're not dealing with the emotion during mealtime. Like, no. So again, a long answer to probably a simple question.
No, I think it's needed, because the majority of people watching this summit probably haven't heard of milestones or have been to milestones, and they don't really know how this works. I think a lot of people are tuning in to learn more, and they need to hear longer explanations. So
I'm your girl.
Yeah, well, great. In that same vein, what can people expect? Like, let's say there is somebody watching this right now. They're connecting with you because they see you, they love your energy. They're intrigued by what Milestones has to offer. What can you tell us about Milestones? Like, what can people expect when they come? What does the living situation look like? Because it's not all about the food, what is it about when they get there?
Good question. Okay. So, basically, so they'd be welcomed on the first day, and we do an assessment. There's all sorts of stuff we do beforehand to make sure it's a match. Like we don't want someone just coming because they just want to lose weight. And that definitely needs to be, their lives become unmanageable. They need extra help. But when they get here, there's all sorts of people they'll be meeting with. Myself as a nutritionist, the doctors, the nurse, they'll get a therapist, a primary therapist to work with. We do groups throughout the day. We do at least 4 groups in the day where there are different process groups with different topics. As far as the nutrition is concerned, they will meet with me. We go over an assessment right then. And then they also did a pre-assessment. So I have a little of their story already. And then we formulate the food plan together, just that person and myself, private in my office. And I started this off with, I kind of want to hear their story, like what got them here and what's been their biggest thing. Most often I will say when people come, or even in that pre-process, they'll hear through phone calls with us or any conversations through about no sugar, no flour, and here's how we roll. But yeah, so the good news is, they get a food plan. So they food shop twice a week. We go to the food store. We have them make a list. We call it meal mapping. People freak out when I use that word. It's not a bad word. It's meal mapping, planning for meals, a little low key fun. Not everyone feels that way. We try to make it fun in a group. But we work on meal mapping and meal prepping for the week. It's apartment style living. So we're not like a lockdown facility. We're actually real apartments. We have 5 apartments and 2 bedroom, 2 bath, kitchens, and they food shop for their own food. They weigh and measure their own food. They pack and prep their own food, and they eat their own food. So what's nice about that is most people are scared. Like, well, I don't want to eat what someone's going to make me. Like, no, you get to do that. And we go over that. And the other thing I love about Milestones, which there's many things, but we are not a tray service. So my thing, and I know Marty's thing is, Dr. Lerner's thing is that, and everyone that works in Milestones, we all feel this way. Like, you don't want to do all this work and then go home and then wait for the meal truck to come. Like, where's the tray service that I've been experiencing for the past 30 to 60 days? Like, where's the, right? Like, from day one, we have you food shopping, prepping. And I have people that come that absolutely do not know how to cook. We had one girl recently, adorable. And she was like, you know what? I had my super unplug my oven. I needed storage space for my sweaters. I don't need to be cooking, which I thought was very inventive. And she used the shelves accordingly. Just with the food plan, we had to call the super and get that plugged back in and take the sweaters out. It was a little extra step. But the idea is, a lot of people come in not knowing how to cook. We do a cooking group. We go simple. You can get real fancy if you want. I don't encourage that. I want C-level of work. So I don't need it to be perfect. I want the effort to be, look what I did for myself. It could be as simple as, a garden burger or a roasted chicken that you just waited out and threw a baked potato, fork to baked potato, put in. I'm easy. I don't need it to be fancy voila moments. I call it. We don't need those. I need it to be dinner. So I hope that was a good description of what it's like in a day of milestones.
Yeah. I'm wondering too about like, so we've dealt with like the physiological piece, removing the substance, right? The sugar and the flour. What about the healthy behaviors? Because most of us come to this eating out of a box, not even sitting down. Like, is there healthy behavior like management, or building a relationship around food, mindful eating? And like, what is that done in group? Like, what does that look like?
So a good question, another good question. So yes, so that kind of two-parter, it works itself out when you're here because, milestone. So you're here with people. You're always eating with either your roommates or a community meal where there's more people at the meal. So it's kind of like a social graces thing starts to happen where you pick up on just natural cues. Now, sometimes people won't, and I will privately talk to them. We've had people pick up their plates and lick them. We've had people want to stand and eat or get up multiple times from the table. I will do a group where I call it's like the idiosyncrasies of having an eating disorder, like all the funs that come with it. I have names for like mush and gush, plated, there's all sorts of fun names that I don't know if they'd be appropriate for this, but fun names to like basically say, like if it's always in a bowl, I have people that pick their seat and then that's a seat. And if someone new wants to sit down, it's like, oh, no. Like, wait, when did we do assigned seats so tight that you can't sit in the seat? Or if that one spoon is like in the dishwasher, like OMG. So we work through all of those, but I will say part of it is also just being with other people, the social graces that you'll pick up on, thankfully, like the, healthier behaviors that happen. But I will, if someone's doing something, I will do private talk with them, or I've done a group session where that's really what we talk about. And people will, openly say like, this is what I do, or I used to do this. I didn't even know this was wrong or, not acceptable. Like, the plate with the finger, like trying to get every last bit kind of thing. So little things like that. So we do address it. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess my ultimate question about some like an inpatient treatment like milestones, and granted it's different than like typical inpatient treatment that I'm used to sending people to, because I'm a licensed addiction counselor, so I'm used to sending people, for like alcohol treatment or methamphetamine treatment, right? Different. And yes, it sounds very different. And so I guess ultimately I'm wondering like what criteria do people need to meet to be appropriate for milestones?
So, okay. So there's a whole assessment, or we call it a pre-assessment, that someone would walk through with one of our clinicians or our admin person, where we ask all sorts of questions. So everything from the BMI has to be 16 or higher. So if you're under 16 BMI, it means you need a higher level of care than we are able to provide for you. We are age-wise, we take 18 and older, so we don't take younger, but we have a case manager on site that if someone calls and if they're younger or if their BMI is not on mark where we need them, she does a nice job of never just being like, oh no, we can't help you. She always makes at least one or two referrals and sets them up. So it's very nice. I'm very, very grateful that that's how we work here. But so the age, the BMI, and then their story a little bit. So it's almost like a mock, not even a mock, but a psychosocial, like a biopsychosocial, where you're getting the information, like what's their story, what's the trauma background, what, with food, where did it start? What's going on right now? Are they actively acting out in, whether it's the volume eating, binging, restricting, vomiting, what behaviors are happening? How often? If there's a medical thing, we might need a medical clearance. Like if there's a diagnosis of something or something current, like we've had some pregnant people not pregnant people, but people that have been pregnant have come, and we just need clearance from their OB. So we can pretty much work through most of it, but there are some guidelines, but usually the age and the BMI is the big one.
So if I'm coming to your treatment facility, are you going to weigh me on a regular basis?
Oh, good question. Oh my goodness. So that's the yay question. So, right. From day one, I'm like the friendly person, but they're also deathly scared of me. They're like, I'm supposed to hate you and you're making me smile, but I'm now not trusting that. So we work on that, but yes. So, and I think of that because of the weight when we do what we call blind weights. So I will weigh you at least once a week, sometimes depending, might be more, but it's a blind weight we do agree before or when you're here, like, what's the goal? Like, not number wise, but is it weight loss, weight maintenance, weight gain? No one really says weight gain, just so you know. I've asked many, many years and no one says that. But I like to ask the question because it's nice to have the information. But we will talk. So I will tell them, like, if it's like, listen, this is about you staying in those clothes, not the exact clothes, but that size, that gauge, so that we learn how to eat again. So the weight is something we have to do because I need to chart it. It needs to be in there. Insurance needs it, all of that. However, I try very hard not to make that the focus. And I always tell them if they're supposed to be losing and they don't, it's a tough conversation, but I'm not afraid to have it. And I will have that conversation and just let them know we just need to make this change together, and we do it. And if it's vice versa the other way, then we also have that conversation. So it's just, I don't talk numbers with them, but just tell them it's not going the direction that we agreed and we need to make a change. But they do get weighed, yes.
And that's such good information, because again, one of the struggles that we find is that, and to use Molly Carmel's, term of diet trauma,
yes.
Right? We have diet trauma, drama and trauma. We work really hard to get our clients to let go of this, right? Because most people, when they come to us, it's all about the weight loss, and to get them to move past, listen, you may not lose. To get food sober, you may not actually lose weight. So that can be a really big hurdle for people to overcome if they ever do. How do you guys address that?
Well, it takes a little time. The honest truth, takes a little time, because when they come in, they can say whatever they want, but they're obsessed with their weight, or, whichever way it is. So it would be a lie for them to be like, oh, I'm fine with it. Actually, I get on high alert when someone's like, cool, you want me to gain weight? Cool. I'm like, oh, no, I'm uncomfortable with that. But I'll tell them that, but yeah, it is a struggle, and it's a build of trust. It's building the trust. So they see, and thankfully the good or bad is I have been doing this for 22 years, and I have been in one place, and Milestones has been here for 22 years. So we have that kind of, we're out there, we're known in the rooms. I would love for this to even, for more people to know about us, because we're not a secret out there. We're really great, and we're really right here, ready for peeps. But what I feel like is not only because we have the reputation and we have it's a work of trust. They see that week one, they're not busting out of their pants, and that, like, they can fit into everything, and they're actually feeling like satiated and not stuffed. And it's over time. Like, if you take someone, I always wish I could tell them on day one how they're going to feel on like day 7 or 10. They're going to feel so much better. But day one, it's all fear and no trust. And there's I used to say to them, wait till you get to day 10. By the way, don't do that. That doesn't help anyone. I learned that a long time ago. But when they get to day 10, I'm like, I'm so grateful you made it to day 10, and look at you. And not even because I'm a day counter. It's more like, let's just pause and remember where you were day one. Like just remember the fear. First of all, what even got you here? And I always say, prior to getting into Milestones, literally, I say up to the stop sign of pulling in, like, I don't know what they're doing with food, like I don't know, but they know it's like, well, I'm coming to Milestones. So how they've hurt themselves before with food, till they even got here, then they got here, and then they're being tossed in a few directions, meeting with, the nurse, the doctor, the nutritionist. By day 10, it's like, I get what you were saying now. So it's very nice. But to answer a simple answer would be trust, and we have to take the time to build it. But thank goodness, I'm very grateful that really does happen while they're here.
Yeah, I always say, like, future you actually believes me. You
Yes,
believe in me.
That's a good one. We're going to be friends in the future. Right now, it's a love-hate. And I don't feel you're on the love side, but yes.
And you're not going to want to weigh yourself every day. You won't even think about it.
Oh, right. Yes. Totally.
So I'm going to ask you our signature question.
Okay.
And that is, what is something you would tell your younger self about food addiction recovery, eating disorder recovery, or like food addiction, sugar, flour? Like, what is something you would tell what is something?
Yeah.
I'm butchering
my
this,
younger self.
you
I heard
yeah.
you. I'm on it. Well, it's funny. My first reaction is, well, I came to this pretty young, as far as like being here 22 years. Like, that was my first, I only worked in that private practice for a little bit and came here. So I feel very fortunate that this skill and this group of people I get to work with came to me pretty young in my career. So I would say, good job finding that early, Nikki, because somehow you found what you needed early on in your career. I will say, compared though to my early version of Nikki the nutritionist and with this group peeps, really, although I was open to it, but maybe just I wish I knew more about maybe addiction, or like I said, those first 2 years were kind of spent like, oh, thanks for helping me run that down, like not knowing that and having to like learn those lessons, like, okay, so we don't do that, or like, just to throw myself out there, because this is what I do. So we always, another thing we do is we take our clients to a restaurant to eat out and learn how to experience that. And one of my first restaurants out, I took us to an ale house, which to me, I thought was a lovely, get a piece of chicken, a piece of meat, a baked potato. And I came back and I think my boss at the time called me and was like, do you have the clients at an ale house? And I'm like, yes. And it's going very well. And they're like, do you know what ale is? I'm like ginger ale. And they're like, oh my gosh. All right, just finish up lunch and come back. Everything's fine. I'm like, oh, great. I'm getting fired on my first outing with the clients. So good news. Everyone did well. But if I would talk to my earlier self, I'd be like, let's learn about addiction more in depth at that point. But I definitely feel well-versed now. But those first 2 years were a little like, okay, touch and go. So that's what I would tell myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can all look back and go, I learned so much.
Yeah, I did not know what I was talking about then, but I did feel it. I felt like I did, but not like I feel now. So yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we let you go, we can definitely connect in the show notes, that kind of thing. We'll let people know how to connect with Milestones. How can people connect with you in private practice if they want to work with you?
So I will say that in private practice, I have really been now taking people from Milestones. That's been my boat. Like anyone who leaves here, I then stay with them. So that's been the base of my private practice for quite a while now. And now being chief operating officer, I haven't really been taking, it's a lot. So I actually found another nutritionist, which I feel very excited about, because I feel there needs to be more nutritionists that get this, not get this, but get the whole no sugar, no flour, or the addiction model, and just understand that. So I did train someone, and she gets all my referrals for now, and it's been going great. She literally had to open a new office. She was like, wow, this is really impressive. The amount of people I'm like, they need help and I can't do it. I can't do it. So her name is Vicky, and I actually would have to look up her information. I can give that to you so we can have that. But she's been my right-hand man as far as referrals go.
Yeah, we'll definitely include her in the show notes as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I would like to give her information too. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And we're always happy to connect with another professional who gets this.
Who gets it.
Yeah. Yes. We'd like to know more about her.
And she was new to it. She was like, wait, what? Like she was open to it, which was great. And she had the personality to take it in. It's been wonderful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Nikki. We know you are so busy, so we appreciate your time and taking the time to explain to our audience all about Milestones and what you do.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
If you would like to hear more, tune in every Friday to the Food Junkies podcast, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcast. Subscribe so you'll never miss a show.
Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies, which is available on Amazon.
If you have any additional questions, both Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals and work one-on-one with clients. Their websites and email addresses are available at foodjunkiespodcast.com.
As Vera always says, the power is ours.